Hi, everybody. In case you don't recognize me, I'm Ciara. I am the teen librarian at Rawlings. And first, I wanted to say happy Juneteenth. I'm going to stand up here for a minute. Yes, Black Lives Matter. So happy Juneteenth to everyone, but especially to the Black community. We actually didn't have anything scheduled today, so I am gonna get to my my intros of some of the teen summer reading prizes. But before I do that, we're going to read a children's book. The children's book is called Freedom in Congo Square. And I'm just going to read it to you, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about it. Oh, and this is by Carol Boston Weatherford and R. Gregory Christie. This is one of my favorite books. Mondays, there were hogs to slop, mules to train, and logs to chop. Slavery was no ways fair. 6 more days to Congo Square. Tuesdays, there were cows to feed, fields to plow, and rows to seed. A moment without work was rare. 5 more days to Congo Square. Wednesday, there were beds to make, silver to shine, and bread to bake. The dreaded lash, too much to bear. 4 more days to Congo Square. Thursdays, there were clothes to clean, floors to scrub, and babes to wean. Spirituals rose from the despair. 3 more days to Congo Square. Fridays, there were crops to pick, trees to prune, and walls to brick. Run away, some slaves dared. In this picture, you can see being chased by this guy and his dogs, ones that dared to run away. 2 more days to Congo Square. Saturdays, there were beans to can, hens to pluck, and folks to fan. Freedom was slaves' ardent prayer. 1 more day to Congo Square. Week in, week out, from sun to sun, always more chores to be done. And even as the plantation slept, wood was on the fire kept. But Sunday was a day of rest, when Master charmed the weekend guests. Slaves had off one afternoon when the law allowed them to commune. They flocked to New Orleans' Congo Square. Sundays, slaves and free met there. It was a market and a gathering ground where African music could resound. Beneath the sun and the open air, the crowd abuzz with news to share. Groups by nation, language, tribe, they drummed ancestral roots alive. They played triangles, gourds, and bells, banzas, flutes, fiddles, and shells. Women in gauze, silk, and percale, men in fringe and furry tails, shook tambourines and shouted chants as rhythms fueled a spirited dance. They rejoiced as if they had no cares, half day, half free in Congo Square. This piece of earth was a world apart. Congo Square was freedom's heart. Congo Square is now part of Louis Armstrong Park in New Orleans, which is a famous setting for the jazz festival. I wanted to read this book in particular on Juneteenth because it captures how for so long the Black community, whether they were enslaved, oppressed under Jim Crow, oppressed under systematic forms of oppression as they are today, they've dreamed of freedom, and when able, they've marched for freedom, and they're still doing it. And we need to support them. We need true emancipation for everyone. So happy Juneteenth. And as my t-shirt says, Black Lives Matter. Okay, we're gonna move on now. We're gonna introduce our teen books for the week. Well, actually, this is my second for the week. But so today we're gonna do historical fiction, and we're gonna do horror, thriller, and mystery. So we're gonna start with historical fiction. It's a little less terrifying than the other ones. So our first one is Code Talker. All right, I'll hold it up so you can actually see it. All right. So Code Talker is by Joseph. I'm going to mispronounce his name, and I feel so bad because I actually met him, and he's amazing. Bruchok. So it begins with its main character. I'm going to mispronounce this name because it's a Navajo name. He Yatsi, who was renamed Ned Begay when he went to one of the Native American boarding schools. We'll get to that in a minute. It starts as he's answering his grandchildren's question about his war medal. And from there, he just goes back and he tells the whole story about leaving his beloved family behind when he's first sent to the school. And he doesn't want to go, but his parents think that that will give him a better future. Even though at this US government school, they cut his hair, they won't let them speak Navajo, they strip them of all their history and culture. They're trying to make them white Christians, essentially. And as Ned is growing up, World War II breaks out when he's in high school. He asks his parents if he can join the Marines. They say he has to wait a year, but he joins. And at that point, the Marines are actually recruiting Navajos. So the reason they're recruiting Navajos is because the Navajo language is so difficult to translate. And it's become the foundation of the unbreakable code that will save thousands and thousands of lives in World War II. So Ned is sent to the Eastern Front. And it goes on to describe all these horrors of war that he survives, doing this job that's very secret. He can't tell anyone he's a code talker. He can't tell anyone about the code, but he's relaying messages. And once the war is over, he comes home, and whenever he's in uniform, everyone thanks him for his service and is very kind to him. But when he goes home and he takes off his uniform, they treat him like dirt. They throw him out of places. They say, "Oh, you Indian, get out of here." And it's pretty terrible. But I think that the book, which is heavily, heavily researched, it took Bruchok years and years to write this because he was doing so much research. It sheds light on an essential part of history, both in terms of what the Navajo were able to contribute to winning World War II and how they were treated nonetheless as soon as they took off their uniforms. So it's a great book, and I encourage you to read it. The next book in historical fiction is called Soldier Boy. I'll hold that one up for you. All right. So Soldier Boy was written by Keely Hutton, and it's based on the true story of Ricky Richard Anywar, who grew up in the Congo. Oh, sorry, not in the Congo. Woo-hoo, horrible. Uganda, in Uganda. And that was awful, and I want to apologize. I don't know why that came into my head. But he was forced to become a child soldier. And in Joseph Comey, who was a horrible war colonel, in his Lord's Resistance Army. And the book shifts between the chapters switch between telling the story of excuse me of Ricky and how he's abducted. He's abducted and forced to watch his family murdered, and then sort of goes into this deep brainwashing camp, and is continually brainwashed. And the other chapters are of a character named Samuel, and Samuel had also been in the Lord's Resistance Army, but he had been abandoned. He had been injured in the war, and they had just abandoned him. And he was found and taken to Friends of the Orphans, which was a nonprofit founded by Ricky to rehabilitate and reintegrate child soldiers. And what's really interesting about Samuel is that he's totally resistant. He's completely brainwashed, and he thinks all these people are the enemy. And he thinks they're going to take him to the enemy soldiers and they're going to kill him. And it's Ricky himself who has to start talking to him and gain his trust. But it can be quite gory. I mean, it's about war, and it's about children forced to fight in a brutal civil war. But it's profoundly enlightening, and it also ends with a bit of hope. I mean, and Ricky survives this. He escapes, and he sets up this amazing nonprofit. That reminds us that, even having been through all of that, his love can survive and help others who've been through it. It's a great book, and I recommend you check it out if you win prizes. All right. Our third historical novel is called Orphan Monster Spy. It's an intense title. It's by Matt Killeen, and it's set in Nazi Germany. The main character, her name is Ciara. She's 15. And it starts out with the scene when she and her mother are going through a checkpoint in a car. And her mother is Jewish. Her father actually wasn't Jewish, and she was hiding when they went through the checkpoint. She actually looks incredibly Aryan. She has blonde hair, blue eyes, but she was hiding. And at that checkpoint, the soldiers just shot her mother right in front of her. And she escapes the car, and she's running. She gets up onto the rooftops, and she's just wandering on the rooftops. And she sees this man being sort of interrogated by police. And she helps him sort of get out of that interrogation. And he's this sort of mysterious man. And he takes her in, and they go back to his apartment, and it's totally bare, but he has all this huge cache of weapons. And that man goes by Helmut Haller in Germany, but he's actually a British spy. So his real name is Captain Jeremy Floyd. Now he offers to sneak her out of Germany because she saved him, but she says, "No, I want to help you. I want to help you undermine the Nazis." So his main mission is preventing this Nazi scientist, whose name is Hans Schaefer, from developing a neutron bomb. So her role in this is that he enrolls her in an elite Nazi boarding school where all the elite Nazis send their daughters. And she takes the name Ursula and poses as his niece. And her mission is to get close to that scientist's daughter, to befriend her, and eventually be able to see the blueprints for this neutron bomb. But as this is all developing, there are also flashbacks to before her mother was killed and what it was like for her and her mother to survive in Germany, on the run, hidden, stealing food when they have to. And Ciara is very impressive. She was a gymnast, and her mother homeschooled her. Her mother had been an actress. She's very gifted, and that helps her, with her mission at the school, posing. But still, she's at a school where the teachers, the adults, the kids are all completely bought in to Nazi ideology, and are singing these songs constantly and many of which are about wanting to destroy her. And you think about how psychologically damaging that is, having just lost your mother to this. And it's a pretty difficult school to sort of be new and make friends at, It's kind of like they're all mean girls. So her mission is very, very difficult. She does end up making friends with Elsa, the daughter of the Nazi scientist. But I'm not going to tell you whether she achieves her goal. And I also want to just tease you with the fact that, is Jeremy precisely the hero he appears to be? Got to read to find out. But if you're a fan of World War II historical fiction, if you like Codename Verity, I think you'll really enjoy it. And it is quite thrilling, It's this young Jewish girl living on the edge and in the middle of Nazi society, and how someone deals with that psychologically. So yes, another rather intense but very worthwhile book. Okay, we're moving on now to horror, thriller, and mystery. These usually aren't my genres, but I have to say, these are good ones. The first one, let me grab it. Missing Presumed Dead. It's kind of a boring title, if you ask me. I mean, it's just not that exciting, but the book is much better than the title. It's by Irma Bergquist, and it's a paranormal mystery, which is even more fun. So the main character is Lexi, and she has this gift/curse, which is that whenever she touches another human being, she can see how and when they will die. So try and imagine that for a moment. And it's painful for her. It's both physically painful, because she feels death and she's seeing it. And every time you touch another human being, this happens to you. So she also can see ghosts, talk to ghosts, but in a critical moment, she can touch ghosts. And it's not horrifying to touch ghosts. It's actually warm. They're warm. But this ends up, being quite psychologically scarring. She has to isolate herself from everyone, keep everyone at a distance. And she feels like it's just draining her. Every time she does it, it's draining her. Why she does it? Well, she works for sort of a mob boss, who has, his area of influence, but almost everyone, except for his nephew who works for him, has magic powers of some sort. And if you swear yourself to him, he will always protect you, and everyone will always protect each other. So he has this club called Elysium, and she's a bartender there, but she doesn't really know how to bartend. She mostly, when he has a problem with the ghost, it's her job to go and deal with the ghost. Because another of her powers is that she can make a ghost go to the other side. And that is very painful. If a person is resisting and doesn't want to go, it's incredibly painful. And it can injure her. But she can do it. So one night, she goes in and she hears that one of the guys who works in the warehouse, has a gift, named Marcus, has disappeared, and that the boss is concerned about his disappearance. And she's near the bar, and this group of girls who had been hanging out at the bar, they come at her, and one of them bumps into her. It's a young girl, 17, something like that. And she sees that this girl is going to be brutally murdered, like very, very soon. But one thing Lexi has learned is that no matter what you see, how you see someone's going to die, you cannot prevent it. Because if you do prevent it, it will happen later. And someone you love will die instead at that time. So death does not negotiate. She can't stop anyone from being killed. She has to live with the horror of knowing it will happen and feel guilty for not stopping it. So at first, then she works her shift. She doesn't really know what she's doing, and no one likes her because she doesn't want to touch anyone. But anyway, she goes home, and her home, tiny apartment. She has almost nothing, but she has a roommate who is a gay ghost, and he's quite charming. And then he tells her that on the news, this young girl has disappeared. Rather, she's missing. The next day, she's not missing immediately, but she's gone missing. And when she goes in the next day, she goes out to the alley, and her ghost is there. And the ghost is enraged. It just wants vengeance. And Lexi says that she'll help her find the person. And Lexi's actually quite suspicious because people are continuing to disappear, and she thinks there may be a serial killer. So she takes the ghost, whose name is Jane, home with her, and they start working the case, following all the leads. And as they do so, they start to develop a relationship because they can touch. Lexi can't touch living people without agonizingly seeing their death. But she can touch ghosts. And as they work on solving this mystery that's very complicated and exciting, Lexi and Jane are also falling in love. So I found it gripping. I wasn't going to read the whole thing, but I couldn't stop, essentially. I had to read the entire thing. And I definitely recommend it. It's a great story, and it's hard not to feel very strongly for Lexi and to be so happy. She's terrified, Falling in love is a terrifying thing for her. She's been isolated her whole life. But it's quite wonderful. So, great book. The next one, When I Am Through With You, another one that totally gripped me. They all gripped me. This is by Stephanie Kuhn, and it is main character Ben's first-person account of what happened. So They went on a school orienteering club trip, hiking and camping. And it ends up being terrifying and blood-soaked. Ben and his girlfriend Rose have a complicated relationship. I think that's fair to say. But over the course of the book, you realize that all of the relationships of all of the people there are very complicated. And at one point, there's a very ill-advised attempt by a bunch of the teens to go and rob these other shady campers who they think are someone that they aren't. Anyway, they decide to rob. They think they have $500,000. They decide to try and rob them. It ends up bloody, people being shot, people being injured, death. There's also a horrific storm. People are separated, and survival, those who are alive, survival becomes questionable. They can't get out the way they went in. They also think that the person who got away during this skirmish, there was one person who got away. They think that person might be waiting where the car is. No one knows how they're going to survive. And when this is happening, Ben is also learning some secrets about his relationship with Rose. And everyone else goes to look for a way out. He stays with Rose. And he makes a defining choice. So this is not only a compelling page turner, it's a fascinating study of character. So I would recommend it as well. All right, I've got two more. And this is going on forever. Okay, so I've got Lockdown. I didn't have time to read all of this, I'm sorry. But I can give an intro. This is by Alexander Gordon Smith. Look at that cover. Isn't that quite frightening? I can't figure out how to do it straight for you. Okay. This is about Alex Sawyer. He's 14. And he's a poor kid. And was, fairly regular poor kid. And then he started getting in to nonviolent burglary, stealing, stuff like that. And, he had robbed a couple of houses with one of his buddies, Toby, his best friend, Toby. And on the last job, they get this tip about this house. It's going to have tons of cash, to have all these electronics. Nobody's there. They've gone away. So they're sitting outside, and they're making sure there's no light. They can't hear anything. So they break in, and they split up. So Alex goes upstairs to find the cash, while Toby takes care of the electronics. And when he's upstairs, he hears this scream. He's like, oh God, somebody's down there. Somebody's screaming because they saw Toby. And then he turns around. He's not alone either. There are these giant men in these black suits who all look kind of identical. And they have these creepy smiles. So the one upstairs takes Alex downstairs. And Toby's down there. And along with these giants, there's this creepy human-like creature who is dressed all in black but has this huge gas mask on. And they have a gun pointed at. They pull out a gun and they're pointing it at Alex, and they say goodbye to Toby. And he's shocked, And he says, goodbye, Toby. and then they kill Toby. And they put the gun in his hand, and they say, run. And he runs, and he runs, and he runs, but there's no way for him to get away. And the cops catch him. He's been framed by these creepy people. So he's sentenced to life without parole in the Furnace, which is this juvenile detention center that is worse than any prison I have ever imagined. I've imagined some pretty horrible prisons, I have to be honest. It's a mile beneath the surface of the earth. And he knows he's going to die in there unless somehow someone figures out he's innocent. But it's even worse than he thought it would be, because at night, those weird giants walk through the aisles of the cells with those creepy guys with the gas masks, and they'll just choose an inmate and drag him out, and they basically never come back. And then there are these horrific creatures that look kind of like dogs, but they're huge and violent, and they just want to eat you. And they live in this tunnel under, and you can hear them screaming, and you can hear them like essentially eating inmates that have been thrown to them. And it's horrific and terrifying, because you never know who's going to get taken and who's going to die next. Despite this, he does make a couple of friends who seem like pretty good guys. As you imagine, if you're stuck in that place, you have to, the only choice you have is to try and find a way to break out. And so that's what Alex is doing. He's trying to figure it out, and which nobody has ever done. Nobody's ever escaped alive. So, but the entire book is sort of like terrifying. You never know if somebody's going to be eaten or grabbed by these people and murdered, and it's a horrifying experience, but also page turning, exciting. And it's the first in a 4-book series about the Furnace, which is pretty cool. So the last one, I have 2 copies of that, but weird, is called Survive the Night. This is also a thriller / horror by Danielle Vega. And so the main character is Casey, and sometime in the past, she used to be a top student on the soccer team, friends with all the sort of straight-laced soccer players, and then she got a terrible injury to her knee playing soccer. She was in the hospital and feeling pretty horrible. And that's when she met her new best friend, Shauna, who is sort of like what you would think of as the bad girl, She's always breaking the rules, drinking, going to clubs that she shouldn't be going to, living an exciting, if somewhat dangerous life. And Shauna becomes her new best friend. And Shauna also sort of leads her into, it's unclear how serious, but it's definitely abuse of her painkillers, her opiate painkillers. And at a certain point, Casey overdoses and is unconscious, and she gets sent to rehab. And in rehab, she sees things that absolutely terrify her. She sees these other girls who are going through things that she can't even comprehend and are terrifying. So she gets out, and her parents drop her off to spend the night with her old soccer buddies, who are straight-laced. So she gets there, and then Shauna drives, as her parents leave, and then Shauna drives up in the car, and she's like, come on. She's got her other friends in the back. Casey goes with Shauna. So they go to this all-ages club in New York City where everybody just brings in their own drinks. And so they're drinking, but Casey's, sort of like, I'm not really interested in doing much. She's, she's feeling like she doesn't want to go back down that road. And, but she's also enticed by Shauna's sort of her behavior, sort of doing crazy things. She gets really excited. She's caught up in it. It wouldn't be. And so while they're at this club, they hear about this underground all-night rave in the subway tunnels. And not only are her friends going, but her ex-boyfriend, who she still has a serious crush on, is also going. He broke up with her essentially because he's straight edge, doesn't do drugs, doesn't drink. So she doesn't really want to go, but he's going, and everybody else is going, and so she's like, all right, I'll go. And the scene is horrible. She can't stand it. There are these sort of terrifying people everywhere, all these hard drugs. And at one point, she wanders away a little bit. And she sees one of the other friends who is like ripped apart, dead, like horrifically murdered. And nobody could hear her because of the pounding music. And she goes back to tell her friends, but just then the police raid it and everybody runs. And so her friends are running and they see their dead friend. And they're like, holy shit. But they still have to run. Police are coming. So they run out and they end up alone and totally lost in these tunnels. And they hear something. And there's something hunting them. And so the rest of the book, they're just trying to survive the night. Because they don't know if it's a person. They don't know if it's a beast. But they're just trying to survive. So, fairly terrifying. Some gore, for those who love gore. And, yeah. So, if you're into it, pick that one up when you win a book. Got to read enough to win a book. Well, we have great choices, right? And I've got more to share with you next week. There's a nonfiction book, realistic fiction, and science fiction. So check them all out. But today is Juneteenth. I want everybody to think about how weird it is that that's not a national holiday. And think about how important that day is and how important it is for that day to actually be realized. But also enjoy it because it is something to be completely happy about. We just need to keep going. We miss you. Thank you for tuning in. And I'll see you next week on this weird broadcast. Okay. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.